We're good to go. Greetings and salutations, FS Expo 2024. How many have been here at Expo more than once? Okay, we got a few stragglers. I don't know if anybody came to see my product announcement or the product announcements yesterday. I'm Rick Miller. I own Fly Inside. We do helicopters for various things, both commercial. We also do for military, foreign military, and for you guys and me, because I'm one of you guys. So I have been flying simulators since the Sublogic FS1 days on my Apple II. There's a few of us out there, right? So wireframes, and when I started doing that, the day after I installed that, I went to ground school in Jamaica, Queens, and started my commercial flight career unauspiciously. He was, our ground school guy was from Jamaica, not Queens, and it was, you're at 43,000 feet, man, and climbing. And we had no idea what he was talking about, and we're trying to learn ground school from them. So I've been doing this for a very, very long time. As sims got better and as I got better as a pilot, I noticed that, well, there was a hole. Sims were getting better, but you really couldn't fly them properly, especially helicopters. If you guys remember FSX, who had FSX? I know I did, yeah. FSX was great. It had the Bell 206, the Jet Ranger was in it, and it was pretty good. And then who had the Dodo Sim? Nobody? Nobody had the Dodo Sim? That was the first one to allow you to do a start on a jet, on a turbine. And you could blow it up if you did it wrong. It was amazing. We all loved it at that time. Unfortunately, FSX didn't have a lot of features that we all wanted, and that's how our company actually became known, is we did the VR plugin for FSX. We were the first people to allow you to do virtual reality, put on a headset, and actually fly with depth perception. You could lean out the door and look down. You could lean into instruments. So it really changed the experience. And flight simulation in general has been moving forward in leaps and bounds. As technology overall, look at CPU and GPU power at this point. They have massively increased. I just got a 4090. My God, that thing is massive. My power bills are kind of going off the chart. But MSFS 2020 was a new benchmark because the scenery, when it first came out, I'll be honest, I called it Microsoft Scenery Simulator because you didn't fly right, but boy, did it look good. So we decided that we had a product, we still do, we sell it to commercial agencies, flight schools, militaries. It's called Fly Inside Flight Simulator. And it was a commercial product for a while, but we don't want to go up against an 800-pound or larger gorilla that is Microsoft. Why beat them when you can join them? So what we did, and anybody here have the Bell 47 for MSFS or X-Plane? You guys? Okay. So what we did was we had a flight simulator that is FAA approved, it's PCATD, predates the current rules, and it allowed people to log time with Fly Inside Flight Simulator if you went to your FSDO and you got a local approval. So I said, well, the scenery's okay in it, it's not great. You know, pilot training in general doesn't really require a lot of cool scenery, but personally I like to have it. So we said, how do we take our flight modeling, which replicates helicopter realism, actual physics, and move it over into another simulator, whether it be X-Plane or MSFS, not DCS yet. And Dan Church, who was the original owner of the company, and a brilliant, brilliant programmer, he looked at it and he said, you know, Microsoft has this thing called WASM. So that's the way they put programming inside MSFS. He said, I can take our physics engine and I can turn that into a WASM file, and we can run a headless version of our own simulator within Microsoft Flight Simulator. And I said, oh, what's that going to do? Because at that point, I had no idea. And he explained to me that what it will do is it'll bypass the internal flight simulation engine and allow us to inject our own. And because that's already FAA approved, we're now in the process, and I hope to have it done by middle of next year, to get an approval to use Microsoft for scenery generation and use, since it's already using our flight engine, you'll be able to get it certified. And that's what our ultimate goal is. And in order to do that, there is a laundry list of authenticity and realism that has to be met, these requirements for the FAA to allow you to use it. And some of the obvious ones, every system, every circuit breaker, every hydraulic system, everything that works in the aircraft must be replicated. And this is under phase 5. It's a new requirement. There's everything else, and then there's helicopters now at the bottom. They're treating us like redheaded stepchildren, which is okay. So we've been doing that in MSFS. So if you have our 206 and you want to have a hydraulic failure, you can turn off the hydraulic system. If you want to pull some breakers and see what happens, you can lose a fuel pump. You can do whatever you want within the system, and it's realistic. So then we had to look at how do helicopters fly. Any helicopter pilots out here? Any of my peeps? There's one. I see 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5. Like I told everybody yesterday, flying helicopters is not easy. If it was easy, more than 1% of all certificated pilots in the US would be helicopter pilots. Not to mention the fact it is ungodly expensive now. So $450 an hour for training, that's pretty steep. If anybody knows a better deal, let me know, because people keep asking me at the booth. So what can you do to build in physics reality within the flight simulator environment? So you've got air, which is a moving mass. It's a liquid. I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive because we'd all be drowning if that was true, but it is. It functions like a liquid. Microsoft has done wonderful things with wind and surface winds and leeward side wind and clouds and snow and lake effect, and all of that stuff is really great. The problem is it doesn't really interact properly with their flight modeling. So the physics, if you're in a glider, any glider pilots? I know that's a weird question. Oh, we got one in the back, cool. So you're looking for lift. That's a big deal. But with lift comes turbulence, and just recently there was an update that made the turbulence unbelievable. So I've turned it now, just in case you're wondering, turn it down to moderate. Moderate is high, and whatever they have for high is ungodly. That's like flying in a tornado. It is. So we took our flight engine and we stuck it in there, and then we have to have a way to interact with the environment. And that's where it gets a little tricky, because there are all sorts of variables within the flight simulator environment. There's LVARs, which L and A, that's the ones that Microsoft gives you in the SDK, the software development kit, to allow you to connect to the data that's coming out of the sim. So if I want to know what the barometric pressure is or what my altitude is supposed to be according to them, I can take that LVAR and I can use that information on one of their stock gauges. And they have a variable that drives those, and there's canned gauges that you can use. But that doesn't work for us, because not only do I have to know that for my calculations on a gauge, I also have to know it because it's going to affect the engine performance. It's going to, the rotor system, the tail rotor, all of that stuff is going to be affected by density altitude. Density altitude is a bitch. I just now, before I came up here, I was doing a little bit of a mini flight lesson. By the way, if anybody wants a mini flight lesson, we're at booth 330. We've got 4 sims set up. Well, mostly set up now. We're waiting for some parts. And I'm happy to give lessons and introduce you to do Intro to Helicopters 101. But we were flying in Revelstoke, British Columbia, which is a really cool place to fly, but it's 6,500 feet off the ground, and it's summer. So one of our new helicopters we just introduced yesterday is the Rotorway RW162F, which is a 4-cylinder piston-powered aircraft that on a good day might have about 150 horsepower, but it's probably closer to 122 realistically. And if you get into 6,500 feet and it's 89 degrees outside, you are at a significant disadvantage. Then put it in FAA standard size passenger, which they're saying is 170 pounds. I maintain that it might be a little bit bigger than that these days. You put that person in there, and now you want to take off, and you want to hover. Well, you've got a limited amount of power. And if you are in a Microsoft-based aircraft, if they're using their flight model, no problem. Pull in as much pitch as you want, take off, go fly. That's not going to happen in real life. If you did that in the real thing at Revelstoke and you tried to do that, your rotor RPM would drop off to nothing. Your oil and water temperatures would climb like a skyrocket, and you would not be doing well because you would go under 90% of your rotor RPM, and you would lose your rotor authority, your lateral stick, and you'd be dead. And you'd roll over a very expensive piece of hardware. Not that expensive. You can find them out there for $40,000 now, which, by the way, is why we decided to do it, because rotorways are inexpensive enough. You know, if you're going to have a second car, a sports car, why not have a helicopter instead? So I know that sounds a bit crazy, but if you've got a small garage, you can store it in a small garage. So we take all of the information that we're getting from Microsoft, right? The altitude of the airport, the physically where you are, is there any wind on the ground, on the surface or above? And we send that into something called inputs.txt, which allows us to feed that information into our internal FFS, our fly-inside flight simulator engine, and then we do calculations on it that are based on the real-world aspects of the aircraft you are actually flying. And then it sends it back out to Microsoft to tell Microsoft how to display what's going on. And whether that be a gauge or an external view or a failure, that's what happens. It allows us to take what is an immature flight simulation engine, the Microsoft one, and we're really only talking about helicopters here. Helicopters are very, very complex beasts. It's, a billion parts flying in formation waiting to fall apart. We know all these goofy little things. But they didn't give us enough variables to properly simulate flight in helicopters. We have to do it ourselves. So we have to do a whole bunch of calculations inside and then spit them back out. Does anybody do VR? VR? Here's a rule of thumb for the VR guys. If you drop below about 22 frames a second, you will have a problem with any flight model because there are per frame calculations and it screws everything up. So if you find yourself consistently going below, say 24, reduce your settings, get a better CPU, just fix that, and you'll have a much, much, much better experience overall. Our stuff is pretty CPU intensive sometimes because if you're in a storm and you're doing hard overturns and you're having a failure or something like that, there's a lot of calculations going on. And until they come out with a new overall engine that will allow us to use multi-threads and that kind of thing, we're stuck with what they've got. I regularly run the CPU over 100%, regularly. And this new 2024, I'm sure we've all heard, is supposed to make that a little tiny bit better. I hope so. Be nice, wouldn't it, to be able to use the performance that you've paid for? So I've only got a few other things to say. I was going to do a PowerPoint for this, and then I thought to myself, well, what would it be? It would be how helicopters fly, lift, drag, that kind of thing, how rotor systems work, and then how to translate that to the flight simulator environment, which is all math. Nobody wants to go back to a math class. It's kind of boring. So I figured what I'd do is I'd do my little dog and pony show here at the beginning, and then I'd open it up to questions so we can analyze what it is you want to know about how to make helicopters fly realistically in a sim. Or if you've got questions about how they fly in real life, I'm happy to answer those as well. I am a very high-time helicopter and regular aviation pilot, listen to me, general aviation. I'm happy to answer any questions you like, and it could be about the company, it could be about any of our releases that are upcoming. We got quite a few, as some of you might know. In closing, as far as helicopter flight dynamics goes, it's going to get better. The more calculations per second that we can do, the more realistic we can get. Right now, the FAA agrees that what we have in our current sim engine is enough to qualify it as a level 5. So all we have to do now is prove to them that VR can be subsumed as a display device instead of a bunch of projectors, and that they're pretty much on board with. And the tough nut to crack is MSFS. They see it as a consumer product that can't be used as a flight simulator device. We're trying. Stay tuned on our website and probably Discord, because if it happens, I'm going to be popping some champagne corks, because there are going to be a lot of happy lower and smaller flight schools that'll love to have something that doesn't cost $100,000. And if it's raining, they can put their students in it and make a little bit of money. So I'm going to open up the floor. You got microphones over here, and sky's the limit, guys. Whatever questions you want to ask, you feel free to ask them. That is completely up to you. If I can answer it, I will. If I can't, dumb looks are free.
So I got a question. When it comes to your simulator, what hardware what types of hardware do you recommend using and not using?
Well, our fly-inside flight simulator is actually very, very hardware friendly. If you've got any of a second or a third generation old GPU and anything that's a reasonable CPU, you will get high frame rates. To give you an example, fly-inside flight simulator on my system my older system, which is a 3080 Ti with an i7 6700 runs at 267 frames a second. So you can push everything up to the max and it works great. Microsoft Flight Simulator, on the other hand, as we all know, requires a lot more heavy hardware. And that's been true of Microsoft's products since the beginning. They were designing products for hardware that didn't exist yet. So as the product became more mature and we got faster and faster GPUs, you could have nicer and nicer visuals. Hopefully that answers your question.
What about actual flight hardware?
But actually, I can barely hear you.
Actual flight hardware.
Oh, you're talking about like joysticks and collectives and... Okay, so there is a lot of stuff out there for aircraft, for airplanes. Tons. You go out to the exhibit hall and you'll see a lot. There are very, very few helicopter-specific controls. Let's start with the easy one. The cyclic is nothing more than a joystick. So I personally like the Virpil stuff. It's built really well. They have for me, I'm a Bell helicopter pilot, and it uses the B8 grip, which is used in pretty much every Warbird. In fact, their Warbird grip is that grip. And then I try to get a floor-mounted box because you really need that length. Helicopters require only about that much motion to do anything. If you're doing this, you're gonna die. So floor mounted makes it a lot easier, and we give you, in our software, if you go to HeliManager, which is our cheat sheet, if you will, you can set, there's a physical stick travel slider. So when you buy your hardware, you move it left and right, and you watch the artwork in the 2D or 3D presentation, and when it matches, you're calibrated. So you're getting full range of motion. So the big players there, you've got Virpil, does it. Max Flight is making a set of helicopter controls. You've got Puma, the Puma X, and those guys, they're I think in Switzerland. But these are pretty pricey items. You're looking at between $1,500 and $2,000 for a full set. You can roll your own. I have a sim pit that I built quite a while ago now. If you want to write this down, this is a great guy to look at. It's hc625ma.org. hc625ma.org. His name is Alex. He lives in Moscow. He's a really nice guy. And what he did was he created a roll your own. If you have an inexpensive 3D printer, you can print out every single component except for bearings and things. There's a full list of hardware, and this is for 20 different types of helicopters. You can print whatever you want. And it's collective, pedals, and a cyclic. And he has a list of all the Arduino parts that you need. He's done all the software programming already and all the STL files for the 3D printing, all free. And it works great. I've been using it for development purposes for Flying Side since 2015. So you can go right on there and download it. He's a nice guy, answers all the questions. He'll even... Sure, it's HC Hotel Charlie 625ma.org. And check that stuff out. It's pretty decent. And a couple $100 for the printer, about $80 worth of components you can make your own. There's no programming to do. If you can do basic wiring on an Arduino, which is pretty easy to do, you could add in many switches and click stuff that you want. There are other people. I know we're working with Virpil to come out with an actual Jet Ranger style collective, which will be similar to their TCS with the twist grip throttle, but the idle detent will be in a different place. It'll have the cork grip, just like every Bell has ever had, and it'll have interchangeable heads.
They're going to make cyclic controls? They don't really have one.
They do. If you come over to our booth, you can see the one that they offer as a complete set. And it does work really well because you can adjust it so it'll stay where you put it, which really makes a big difference. Trying to fly helicopters any length of time with a spring-based joystick, you are going to get tired very quickly. In real helicopters, depending upon your load, that middle point, the center, changes. With load, with fuel burn, with wind, with everything you can imagine, it changes. So your middle point is not going to be the same every time. So if you've got a spring joystick and you got to find the center, and the center's over here somewhere, now you're holding against the spring pressure for the entire flight. Very, very tiring. Take them out.
So I'm on your website.
My website or?
Well, Flying Side's website.
Yeah, yes, or my website.
So you have a number of products.
Yes. There's two more that I'm going to put as soon as I have a free moment.
What is it that you need to really get? I mean,
a computer would be a good start.
I have everything else.
Oh, that's it?
But which one of these?
Well,
Or do you,
which one do you like?
well, I don't know, there's Flying Side Flight Simulator, there's,
Yeah, that's a standalone flight simulator. We have 5 products.
that's the one that interfaces with, oh, okay, so that's FSX Pro. Flying Side FSX Pro is the one you would add to
FSX,
FSX.
correct.
Okay, and that's all you need from you.
To do what?
To fly helicopter.
No. FSX, Flying Side FSX allowed you to use VR in Microsoft's FSX. We also have our own flight simulator, which is Fly Inside Flight Simulator, and then we have aircraft that you can buy, whether it's on Marketplace or from our website, that has our WASM built into it. So there's 4 currently available. The Bell 206 Jet Ranger, it's a B3, mid-80s. There's a Bell 47, which is the G2A1, which is the metal blade variant with the larger tanks. And that's also available for X-Plane. And then we launched 2 of them yesterday, which are not even on the website yet, because we've been doing this. But it will be on sometime later today. And that's the Rotorway RW162 piston-powered experimental. You can build one yourself. And then there's the Jet Exec, which is the same basic aircraft, but it's full glass cockpit, and it has a Solar T62 turbine engine in it. And it's pretty sexy. A friend of mine owns one. I get to fly it. Yes, sir. Hey, is the microphones on? Is there a switch for on? Hey, is this thing on? Hello? There you go.
So why do you think it's just so little helicopter pilots compared to like fixed wing pilots when it's like cheaper and more accessible to fly?
It's way more expensive to fly helicopters. There's a lot less of them, a lot less of the pilots. Just a lot of it is the expense, but it's also the best path to take, and this is my personal opinion. Go and get your private pilot, learn how to fly, get familiar with the ATC system, and then go and get your helicopter, your rotorcraft add-on, 20 hours, right? That'll get all your basic stuff. Then go do your commercial. Now, if you want to have a helicopter path, do helicopter commercial. If you want to have an airplane path, then you've got to do single, multi, all of the normal stuff that you do, and see if you can find somebody to pay for it. Military does that, but you're talking about, well, probably about $100,000 now to get all the ratings. And that doesn't really even get you a job. That gets you probably a flight instructor position where you're eating ramen for the next couple of years. Not that I don't like ramen, but yeah, it's tough. Dan Church, the guy who used to own Fly Inside, still works for us independently. He is now starting that airline career. He just started working for a company that flies PC-12s, DAR PC-12s, and they're doing like Nantucket runs and things like that. And he's a second in command, and he has no control over his schedule, and he works sometimes. And it's you got to really want to do it. And then getting up to the airline industry, with to fly tube liners. They're fun to take off and they're fun to land, but the en route section is really boring. Like a 22-hour flight to Australia, what do? Every 15 minutes you do a cross-check? Do you really need to? So a lot of knob twiddling now, but not a lot of actual flying, which is what sent me from the airline career over to helicopters, because I like to actually fly. I want to play with the controls. And until very recently, it was hands-on all the time. Sir?
So 2 questions. First, you said DCS yet.
Yet, I did say that.
So,
We're talking about it internally. The problem with DCS is so much of it is proprietary. It would take a complete overhaul to allow us to connect to them in general. And I've reached out to them on countless occasions, say, hey, you want to work together to kind of do it? They're not interested. They have their own helicopters in there, and they really haven't updated any of the flight modeling in a long time. I do see periodically people say, oh, the Huey is the gold standard in DCS. It flies better than... We all know, anybody who's flown in a helicopter before knows, it's cool. It is cool. But if I did the stuff that I can do in DCS in the real world, in a Huey, I would be really dead. Like, there'd be no tail boom. It'd chop it right off. There wouldn't be anything left. But we're working on it. If anybody knows anybody over there and starts poking them, I'm happy to talk to them about doing an overhaul. And the nice thing is, if they allow us to kind of get inside there and develop our existing FFS system for them, that would allow them to use it on other aircraft because it would already be connected. Your mileage may vary.
And second question, we saw the pictures of that wonderful gazelle yesterday.
Oh yes, my personal
And
favorite.
a couple of us were shouting, I don't think you heard us, Blue Thunder model when?
Yeah, okay, let's talk about that stuff, because my day job is I produce feature films and television. So I'm really kind of tuned into the whole intellectual property thing and rights. And let's talk about Blue Thunder. Blue Thunder put out by a movie company, and those rights are owned by them. If we wanted to do a real Blue Thunder and have it be what you thought you saw in the movie, which of course was a gazelle with the front chopped off and a bunch of fiberglass stuck on it, we would have to license that. And the current cost of licensing something like that is about $130,000 a year. And you have to give them a percentage of your profit. So you've got all of that accounting to do. Is it worth doing a Blue Thunder? By the same token, Airwolf. We all love Airwolf. I got a lot of time in 222s. They're really fun, unless you're flying the 222, not the B, where it likes to Dutch roll as it flies like a tuna or a salmon flying upstream. If you ever want to get someone really sick in a helicopter, find a 222 and put them in the back seat and just fly, because it just wags its tail. That's why the later models and the retrofit had yaw dampers to stop that from happening. So, but it's a cool helicopter, and when you put 800 pounds of fiberglass on either side, you get Airwolf, but that's copyright. So that's why it's fine if, somebody not making any profit or giving it away can do it, but if we did it, we would have to pay the piper, as they say. So.
It'd be a real shame if the dev kit suddenly popped out and let people just add stuff to it.
Yeah, it would be terrible, just terrible. No comment. Yes?
I got a couple of questions, particularly since this thing was built for aerodynamics and so on. Do you currently, for example, I'm not real familiar with the level 5. Does that require good auto-rotative and, say, vortex ring state modeling?
It does. It's much more than that, though. Level 5, it's weirdly, there's 1 through 4, which take care of fixed wing. So it's not like it gets more complicated when you get to 5. 4 is the most complicated. 5 is helicopters only. So they've kind of thrown it. It doesn't mean, oh my God, you have to do more than an airplane guy. It just means we have to meet the number 4 requirements. So every single aerodynamic state for any emergency that any FAA person can foresee, we must model effectively. And we do.
And then second, I mean, it's pretty critical, even though it's not aero modeling. What about surface contact if I want to do slopes? If I'm in a Huey and I got to do a scrape-off landing because
Sure.
I don't have enough power.
Dust-offs are easy.
Is that pretty well modeled?
Every one of our models does slope landings properly. You will run out of cyclic, side cyclic. You will roll over. Dynamic rollover is a real thing. You can do run-on landings. You can do running takeoffs. You can even ditch in water. Although I don't know if anybody knows, but every body of water in MSFS 2020 is only 3 feet deep. So if your skids are high enough, you're good to go. We do a floats model for all our stuff. Be careful because we've modeled water physics. So if you're yawing on the water a little bit too fast and one of those goes underwater, bye. Learn to swim really quick.
And then
Yes?
the other problem, and this is something I dealt with military-wise with military simulators years ago. And we used to complain about it because of the way detection of objects intermeshing detecting. So if I got a blade strike, is that considered like blue screen of death? Or
Depends on the aircraft. Fiberglass blades, you have a blade strike and you're close enough to the ground and you can get that thing on the ground fast enough, you're going to have a lot of vibration because you're missing a big chunk of something, but you could still survive that. Something like a Huey, which is, I got a lot of time in Hueys, you could lose 3 feet of one blade and still fly. You wouldn't like it, but it will get you home. So you take like a Gazelle, which I love. I had a Gazelle, it's great. Problem is if you hit something, those blades disintegrate. They're gone, there's nothing left. So you are not flying. I mean, they barely fly as it is because they're really narrow chord and they're spinning really fast to keep you in the air. It does not like flying without blades.
Thank you.
No problem. Anybody else? This is good. This is, get a conversation going. Way over there? Okay.
Question from online. Is there an all-in-one setup that you would recommend?
I can't really recommend an all-in-one setup only because everybody is different. I can tell you what I use, and you can replicate that to the best of your ability or your fiscal sense. You could throw money at any problem and still have the problem. So what I have for my development computer, and I never get like the top of the line anything because I need to replicate it for more than just the top 2%. So while I have a machine that I'm using in here that has a 4090, my personal development machine has that 3080 Ti. It's an i9. I'm trying to remember which i9 it is, but it's not the newest, latest, greatest. I think it's a 10th or 11th or 12th generation. I've got 64 megs of RAM. I've got an SSD dedicated simply to MSFS, which, by the way, I'm running out of space on because I think it was only a terabyte. And then I've got a hard drive that I keep a bunch of other stuff on for the computer and modules and add-ons and stuff like that. And for my joystick, for my cyclic, I have the one from hc625ma.org, and I have the same for my collective. There's pictures if anybody wants. I think they're on our website, but they might not be. Go to our Discord. By the way, our Discord is super active, and I'm almost always on it. One of my devs is always on it. There's always somebody to ask. Things like if you wanted a custom livery for one of our aircraft, you can just ask for it and send some pictures and we'll make it for you. This way, in the next update, if you're flying in a group, your livery can be seen by everybody else. The other thing I want to make a point to tell you about that is if you don't own one of our products, but you are in a multiplayer environment and you want to see one, just go and download the update and install it. You won't be able to fly the aircraft, but it will appear as a multiplayer aircraft for other people flying. So computers, what would be the minimum? I would say for MSFS 2020 today, I wouldn't want anything less than a 2080 Ti. Get what you can afford. Dial back the knobs a little bit. I do find in VR, especially if you're using something like a Quest 3, you don't need to have everything cranked up because it's wasted because of the resolution of the Quest. Your best bet when you're doing VR, keep that 90 hertz. It'll really prevent the flickers that you get. It's always going to stutter at some point because Microsoft loads so much stuff from online. Have a good internet connection. Hope that answers the question. Next.
Question on fly-inside's flight modeling.
Yes.
So I've been predominantly flying in DCS for the last 7 years. Helicopters exclusively, full set of helicopter controls.
Addictive, huh?
It really is. When Microsoft Flight Simulator came out with helicopters, I was really excited, and I've downloaded a few third-party modules from there. None of yours yet. Because one of the biggest problems I've noticed with how Microsoft Flight Simulator flies is anti-torque. And I'm not a real pilot. I fly with them online, and I pretend to, but I'm not. But the anti-torque always feels wrong, and it's hard to explain.
Because it is.
It is, and so I was gonna ask, how does Flying Inside do it differently, and what quirks do you notice about 2020's handle?
The way we do it differently is we're modeling it on our own. All the mathematics to make the anti-torque system feel like an anti-torque system is built into our WASM. It's our flight simulator engine. So those calculations, all Microsoft is doing is showing you the pictures of what's happening, but as far as what's happening comes from us directly. And I model it to feel just like it feels when I fly. So the amount of pedal, that kind of thing, all comes from there. The quirkiness you get, just so you know, if you want to try one of ours, first you can try it here at the booth, but in Heli Manager, which is our management console, you can make it as stable as you want. You can have it do the tail rotor for you. There's sliders in there. So the idea is we put that in there so you slide it all the way up to 0 realism, right? And it's not a realism slider, it's a stability slider. It gives you artificial stability. You fly it around like that, and every once in a while when you're feeling a little more confident, move it a little bit. And before you know it, you'll have it all the way to the left and you won't need it anymore. Flying helicopters is difficult. I think the biggest issues that I have with people out there in the troll world is they'll go, it doesn't fly right. I can fly any other, I've been flying helicopter sims for 6,000 hours, and I can fly anything out there, but I can't fly your helicopters. They don't fly right. Nope, they do. The problem is you don't fly right. Those particular habits, it's not a UFO, it's a helicopter. It is affected by the environment around it. And if you're used to flying, go back, any of you, if you still have FSX installed, go fly the 206 in that. And you'll go, oh my God, this is crazy. But you'll be able to fly it like a hero. You know, it's like slew mode. So I can't cater to these guys. I can't address every single question when they say this is wrong and this is wrong, when it isn't. Go to the Pilot Operating Handbook, which of course we know is a pipe dream for aircraft manufacturers. Anything in the POH will happen exactly the way it does in real life. I take so much time and effort. That's why it takes so long to release one of these helicopters, is because it has to be right. Because we're using it for flight simulation training for people like Bell Helicopter. If I did it wrong, they wouldn't buy it. So, and all the new companies that we've just signed contracts, Enstrom, Composite FX, these guys are going to be using these aircraft to train their pilots, the people who buy their machines. So if it didn't fly right, they wouldn't do that. So just learn how to fly it and take lessons. I do group flights where I do basic flight instruction. Multiplayer is my favorite thing. We get all on Discord and we're on a voice channel and we talk about what we're doing. People ask questions and we do it in real time. Just keep going to the Discord. Sorry, I know you were patiently waiting. I get to rambling and this is my thing, so.
Let's see. Okay. Would you, Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, they're going to be developing career modes.
Yes.
Would you ever consider doing a functional check pilot career mode to allow you to set up an aircraft like using a checklist, anything like that?
We have that now.
Okay. There
There are checklists that we include that you can pop up under checklist in Microsoft. And you look at the Jet Ranger startup. That is probably one of the most iconic things you can do in a Jet Ranger. Anybody ever start a turbine engine in the audience? You guys, you know what a hot start is, right? Boy, if you screw that up, you are gonna do at least $250,000 of damage now. And that is faithfully modeled, and you must follow the checklist. You don't, you get problems. The only difference is here you can sit, ignore, or retry. You can't do that in real life.
Right. Would you include like a functional check pilot checklist that's checking temps, like checking?
Are you talking about like check airman stuff?
Yes. That type of
It would be interesting to do. Right now, I personally do, using a couple of different aftermarket things that are not perfect, but they work okay. I do flight instruction on a one-to-one basis for people who are really into it. There was a product that was out that was really good, Join FS, if anybody tried it. And then the developer who was in England decided he was going to change the way it worked completely and just broke everything. And the old version really works great, but it doesn't have a lot of support. So there's another one, your controls. It's just so buggy and doesn't deal with Z variables, and a lot of our stuff is Z variables. Why? Because there are no variables to model helicopters, so we have to make up our own, and those aren't directly passed through like SimConnect engine or anything like that, so it's impossible to do that. So in Fly-Inside Flight Simulator, we have a multiplayer, and we can do one-to-one and shared cockpit. And shared cockpit is really, really fun. Of course, I won't be able to move your controls or do what I do in the real world, which is put my hand around the stick and prevent you from moving it too far. You know, so you've heard people go, oh, I flew a helicopter, you let me hover, I could do it. That's, yes, because we want you to come back and take lessons. So, anybody else? We've got a few minutes left, so. Oh, yeah, what do you got?
Michael asked, are there products available for both MSFS 2020, 2024, and X-Plane 12?
Our Bell 47 works in X-Plane 12 just fine. Some people have a weird error that pops up that says there's a sound file missing, but there is no sound file missing, but it works exactly the way it intended. We're going to have an update, probably the beginning of next year when we release the 206, the Jet Ranger to X-Plane. 2024, all of our stuff works perfectly with no changes whatsoever. So I'm just waiting to see what features. My fear is that MSFS 2024 is going to be GTA. It's Grand Theft Auto. And that open sandbox environment, it's great, but it's not a flight simulator. I don't need the ability to drive cars or sail boats or steal stuff from people. I'm a flight simulator guy. I want to fly. So, and if you want to do careers and stuff like that, sure, knock yourself out. I don't even like doing ATC because I'd have to deal with them in the real world, you know? So I don't want to talk to those guys when for recreational, I'm flying around in a simulator. And leave that to somebody else. But different strokes for different folks. You like it, you do it. If it makes you happy, do it more. I just signed on as a as some kind of expert for the AI guy doing ATC, because he wants to integrate helicopter stuff into his AI so it knows how to deal with helicopters. It's pretty easy, right? We don't have to deal with the flow of traffic. We just tell you I'm landing on taxiway Alpha and, I have your information. Thank you very much. Good day. And they're happy as long as we stay away from the non-helicopter crowd. Yes, sir.
I had a chance to try a demo at your booth
what'd you
earlier
fly?
this morning.
I can't see you, so I don't know who you are.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah, I don't remember exactly, but it was a fantastic demo, and thank you for the tips on not dying. They were very helpful.
Oh, I must have done that because I like to tell people how to not die.
My question was, just you've kind of addressed some of the challenges of integrating an existing flight simulation into MSFS. I was wondering if you just might elaborate on that a little bit more. What are some of the challenges maybe moving from whatever your original development environment and model was to that WASM-based system?
The biggest problem, since everything we did was in C++, the biggest problem was taking all the links that went out from C++, all the separate CPPs, that connected to our own internal engine, for the graphics or for the sound, and figuring out how Microsoft wanted me to tell it how to implement some of that stuff. It was hard because their SDK, if anybody does any development, their SDK and their help system is anything but helpful. I have an update for the 206 that we sent to them, I think on the 11th. And back and forth, and then they found a bug on their end. They told us it was us, and then they found the bug. And I was like, well, that's great, but you've just now delayed my update. Hopefully it'll be out this Thursday, or maybe it's already out. I don't know if somebody check Marketplace for me and tell me if it's 2.90 yet, but that's the latest version. So there's a little snippet, but it's tough. The APIs, you really have to make them mesh. And that's the tough part because we did it our way and now we have to do it their way. So we're doing a lot of internal translation.
So were you translating the entire thing across into that environment? Or
just the inputs and outputs.
Okay.
So basically it's a black box.
Okay.
So we steal data from them, it goes through our little Blender engine, and not Blender, the art thing. And then it gets sent back to them in the format that they require to make it work.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure. We're down to 3 minutes.
All right, so quick question on VR, because I was an early adopter on the, when it was before you bought, I assume, Fly Inside.
Yes, definitely.
So did you, out of curiosity, was it a purchase for their engine, right? Because you guys are kind of pivoting out of VR per se. You're doing VR, but,
yes.
But you're a helicopter company at this point. Right?
Yes, pretty much.
So what was, just curious what the rationale was for purchasing Fly Inside. Was it for their engine?
I was the flight model developer. So I was the guy I'm the special sauce. So the developer, the head guy would build all these things and make them all work. And then I would get in it and say, okay, well, this doesn't fly like an aircraft. Let's start with this and fix it. And then he would go and do code, and then we'd come back and we'd do it again. And we had it down to a science. We still do. He still works with the company. He does that last mile stuff with me, where he logs into my sim computer via a program called AnyDesk and opens up all these windows on my machine while I get into VR and I just fly. And I say, all right, Dan, the collective is too responsive. Okay, hang on. Okay, restart. How's that? Oh, that's better. And typically what he'll do is he'll put it so far to the wrong direction and he'll say, did I go the right way? Yeah, just don't go that far. Back and forth. And we do that for an hour or two at a time, and that's how we really dial in the final mile of these models to get them to fly realistically.
Interesting. Thank you.
Sure. Minute 30. I could probably take one more.
Say the name of your company again, please.
It's Fly Inside. No worries. And it's a capital I in there because I think it looks cool. No other reason. Well, thank you very much for your time. I'll be at booth 330. We've got 4 sims there. You can come and hang out and talk to us. And I'm always looking to talk to people and hear your thoughts, what you want. The Gazelle we're working on. We already have the flight model. We already have about 3/4 of the art is already done. And I'm very much looking forward to flying that thing around because I used to fly it a lot. And that's it, 55 seconds. How is that for timing? Thank you.